Hello students, I am Nidhi Markade. Today we are going to start our new chapter in biology, chapter number 7, control and coordination. So students, if we see something moving, we say it is alive. Some of these movements are in fact the result of growth, as in plants. For example, a seed germinates and grows. And we can see that the seedling moves over the course of a few days. It pushes soil aside and comes out. But if its growth were to be stopped, these movements would not happen. But some movements, as in many animals and some plants, are not connected with growth. For example, a cat running, children playing on swings, buffaloes chewing curd. These are not movements caused by growth. So, why do we associate such visible movements with life? Can you tell me? Actually, a possible answer is that we think of movement as a response to change in the environment of the organism. The cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. Not only that, we also think of movement as an attempt by living organisms to use changes in their environment to their advantage. So, plants grow out into the sunshine, children try to get pleasure and fun out of swinging, buffaloes chew curd to help break up tough food as so as to be able to digest it better. When bright light is focused on our eyes or when we touch a hot object, we detect the change and respond to it with movement in order to protect ourselves. If we think a bit more about this, it becomes apparent that all these movements in response to the environment is carefully controlled. Each kind of a change in the environment evokes an appropriate movement in response. So, when we want to talk to our friends in class, we whisper rather than shouting loudly. Clearly, the movement to be made depends on the event that is triggering it. Therefore, such controlled movement must be connected to the recognition of various events in the environment, followed by only the correct movement in response. In other words, living organisms must use systems providing control and coordination. In keeping with the general principles of body organization, in multicellular organisms, specialized tissues are used to provide these control and coordination activities. So, the movements is shown as a response to a change in the environment by the organisms. Some movements are growth related while other are not. Next, nervous system in animals. So, in animals, such control and coordination are provided by nervous and muscular tissues. Touching a hot object is an urgent and dangerous situation for us. We need to detect it and respond to it. How do we detect that we are touching a hot object? Actually, all information from our environment is detected by the specialized tips of some nerve cells. These receptors are usually located in our sense organs, such as the inner ear, the nose, the tongue, and so on. So, gustatory receptors will detect taste, while olfactory receptors will detect smell. These information acquired at the end of the dendritic tip of a nerve cell sets off a chemical reaction that creates an electrical impulse. This is very important phenomena conducted by a nerve cell. These impulse travels from the dendrite to the cell body and then along the axon to its end as shown in the figure. At the end of the axon, the electrical impulse set off the release of some chemicals. These chemicals cross the gap or synapse and start a similar electrical impulse in a dendrite of the next neuron. This is a general scheme of how nervous impulses travel in a body. So, a similar synapse finally allows delivery of such impulses from neurons to the other cells, such as muscle cells or glands, etc. It is thus no surprise that nervous tissue is made up of an organized network of nerve cells, or we can say neurons, and is specialized for conducting information via electrical impulses from one part of the body to another. So, overall, we can say nervous impulses travel through neuron, nerve fiber, and synapse. Generation of impulse, how it takes place. Sense organs have specific receptors with the dendritic tip of a nerve cell. The information of external stimulus is received at the end of the dendritic tip, and electric impulse is generated by sets of chemical reaction. Then transmission of impulse, the nerve impulse generated at dendritic tip travels from the dendritic tip to the cell body, and these impulse travels from cell body to axon and finally reaches to the nerve ending. And the synapse work, synapse is a gap between nerve ending of an axon of one neuron and dendrites of the next neuron. Now, let us discuss this receptor concept in detail. So, take an example. For example, there are touch or we can say thigmoreceptors in the skin. So, skin is thus the sense organ. Touching a hot object may cause injury, but due to touch receptors in the skin, which have the specialized tips of some nerve cells, due to which there is an instant sensation of heat, and we therefore withdraw the hand in response to touching a hot object. So this is one of the function of receptor in our body. So let us discuss it. A specialized structure in human body that receives external stimuli is called receptor. These receptors are located in our sense organ, and types of receptors are as follows here. For example, gustatory receptors, location on the surface of the tongue and used in the body to taste. Then olfactory receptors, the location nasal epithelium, and its function is to smell. Then thigmoreceptors in the skin to touch. Then photoreceptors, clear from the word, in the eye and used to see the objects. Then audio or we can say phonoreceptors, location in the internal ear and used to detect sound. Next topic, reflex action. So reflex is a word we use very commonly when we talk about some sudden action in response to something in the environment. We say, I jumped out of the way of the bus reflexly, or I pulled my hand back from the flame reflexly, or I was so hungry my mouth started watering reflexly. What exactly do we mean? A common idea in all such examples is that we do something without thinking about it or without feeling in control of our reactions. Yet these are situations where we are responding with some actions to changes in our environment. How is control and coordination achieved in such situations? Let us discuss. Take one of our example. Touching a flame is an urgent and dangerous situation for us. One seemingly simple way is to think consciously about the pain and the possibility of getting burned and therefore move our hand. An important question then is, How long will it take us to think all this? Actually, the answer depends on how we think. We know if nerve impulses are sent around the way we have talked about earlier, then thinking is also likely to involve the creation of such impulses. Thinking is a complex activity, so it is bound to involve a complicated interaction of many nerve impulses from many neurons. If this is the case, it is no surprise that the thinking tissue in our body consists of a dense network of arranged neurons. It sits in the forward end of the skull and receives signals from all over the body, which it thinks about before responding to them. Obviously, in order to receive these signals, this thinking part of the brain in the skull must be connected to the nerves coming from the various parts of the body. Similarly, if this part of the brain is to instruct muscles to move, nerves must carry these signals back to different parts of the body. If all of this is to be done when we touch a hot object, it may take enough time for us to get burned. So, how does the design of the body solve this problem? Rather than having to think about the sensation of heat, if the nerves that detect heat were to be connected to the nerves that move muscles in a simple way, the process of detecting the signal or the input and responding to it by an output action might be completed quickly. Such a connection is commonly called a reflex arc. Where should such reflex arc connections be made between the input nerve and the output nerve? The best place, of course, would be at the point where they first meet each other. Nerves from all over the body meet in a bundle in the spinal cord on their way to the brain. So, reflex arcs are formed in the spinal cord itself, although the information input also goes on to reach the brain. The reflex arcs have evolved in animals because the thinking process of the brain is not fast enough in case of animals. Many animals, in fact, have very little or none of the complex neuron networks needed for thinking. So, it is quite likely that reflex arcs have evolved as efficient ways of functioning in the absence of true thought processes. However, even after complex neuron networks have come into existence, reflex arcs continue to be more efficient for quick responses. Let us summarize this all. Reflex action, it is an involuntary response to external stimuli without the knowledge of the voluntary centers of brain. And reflex arc is a connection between the input, that is sensory nerve, and the output, that is motor nerve, along with the spinal cord. And voluntary actions occur under the control of will of an animal, while the nervous system uses electrical impulses to transmit the messages. So according to this diagram, actually it is a path of reflex action which consists of receptor, sensory neuron, relay neuron, and motor neuron connected to effector organ. So, students, I hope you understood the initial part of this chapter, that is neurons, nerve cell, and reflex action. Thank you for listening.